What I found, or my thoughts were that when we were growing more cereals and we had less stock, that the only real winner was the contractor, and that it made sense to me to maximise the amount of livestock that we had on the farm, therefore utilising the 2 members of staff as much as possible and not paying for more staff to come onto the farm. You asked about our philosophy, and our philosophy really is, you know, on this 700-acre farm is to produce as many kilos of beef, sheep, and now fruit as at all possible in the calendar year. What I wanted was a female that we could breed ourselves, so that we're making some progress with the genetics of the sheep and breeding a ewe that did well on my farm. So what we started off with was we went down to New Galloway and bought some Romney hoggets down there, thinking that they would do exactly what we were wanting and would be able to breed up our own females. We altered that slightly a few years later and went with a company called Risington, who are a genetics company from New Zealand, and they were offering a ewe which was slightly smaller. The Romney was very big, but maybe a bit more prolific and a bit more milk on her as well. Behind me we've got 400 ewes, which are the basis nucleus of our Highlander breeding programme, and from this we're going to select the top 10% of ram lambs, and they're going to be sold on as shearlings for other people to breed Highlanders. The rest of the ram lambs will be kept entire as well, again focusing on maximum lamb production. We'll pick out what we need for our own replacements, and we also sell females locally to other sheep farmers. And what doesn't make the grade on the female side of things will be killed at Morrison's as well. To the top this year we're topping 1,100 ewes, but 250 of them are hoggets. What we do is, as I said earlier, if you take the start of the year being now when the tup's going in, the tups will be out for from the middle of November until the turn of the year, and then we'll take the tups out. We're scanning in early February, and then they'll go on to the brascas for 6 weeks thereafter. The singles at that point will be in bare grass, completely overstocked, but with a lifeline bucket. The triplets will be on a decent bite of grass and a decent level of concentrate feeding, and the lifeline buckets. When it comes to lambing time, what we do is we set stock fields. We'll have a 20-acre field, and dependent on how much grass there is in that field, we'll decide on how many ewes to put into it. So it may vary from 2 an acre to 4 an acre, depending on grass availability and grass growth. The ewes all stay there for the whole period of lambing. We don't take anything out unless there's a problem, and after about 30 days, 20-30 days, we'll go in with the mobile sheep yards, gather them all up, tail the lambs, leave them entire, give them the first heptavac. Ewes will be wormed, and then we'll start grouping the sheep up, because by this time the grass is growing a lot faster and beginning to get away from them. We're coming to weaning. We're usually weaning lambs at about 100-120 days. When we do this, what I like to do is weigh everything. Not the ewes, but all the lambs are weighed at this point, and this gives me a production figure. So with this production figure, I'm able to say that that field grew X amount of kilos of lamb, and on the broader picture, say my ewes produced 160% or whatever it is to weaning. We're also able to put a financial figure on the production. What we did this year was slightly different. We were very fortunate that we have an organic farm that grows beautiful red clover, and a good lot of the lambs will go there and be finished on it. We're getting growth rates of 250-300 grams a day on this red clover, but I'm aware that that might not be forever, so we tried growing swift this year, and I've said before, but we had 12-13 acres of swift, 480 lambs on the swift, and it was able to finish them all. We're again getting growth rates of sometimes in excess of 300 grams on the swift. This is the 22nd of November, and we have less than 10% of our lambs left on farm. The rest are all killed. If you look at our table of performance, what we're recording there are the obvious things like scanning percentage and tailing percentage, and what we always look at is the sheep enterprise as an average over the whole thing. You have to remember that this is unassisted as well. These ewes and hogs are doing it by themselves. There's one guy on a bike during the summer, during the springtime at lambing time, and he has very little intervention. Further along the table, you'll see other things we're recording. Again, simple things. How many acres of grass are the ewes using? How many ewes are there per acre? How many lambs are there per acre? As I said, at weaning time we record the total weight of lambs. How many kilos of lamb are we producing per acre? And what does that mean financially? These are all just key points that I think are important, and a simple measure of how the sheep enterprise is doing. All the ewes are away grazing on dairy farms at the moment to leave our own farm to kind of rejuvenate after a grazing season. At the end of January, all the ewes come back here, we scan them, and we get rid of anything that's not nothing lamb. And then what we're trying to do is to graze as many ewes as possible on as small an area as possible. We used to grow solely kale, but after adding neeps one year as a bit of an experiment, we found that there was an awful lot more eating in a neep than there is in kale. So we've gone to a compromise where we've got a bit of kale, a bit of neeps, and it actually makes it an awful lot easier to move the electric fence, because when we just had kale, you have this big wall of greenery that you've got to put a fence through. So it works really well. And we carry all of the ewes on this brassica mix for the 6 weeks prior to lambing. We've got 230 cows. 130 are calving in the springtime and inside. And then we've got another 100 calving in the autumn, and they calve outside. We're using the Simmental now for our maternal line, with the Charlie being used as a terminal line, and anything that we wouldn't want a replacement from. We're doing this again to maximise output. I believe that that those are the two best breeds, at my disposal at the moment to to get the weight and the performance that I want here. All the calves are kept entire, and we do this again to maximise the output. We're killing the bull calves at about 15 months old and averaging somewhere around about 390 kilos. The bulls, again, we do it because what we're looking for is average performance. I'm not worried if one animal goes to Fainston and sells for £1,500. What I'm trying to do is to get 100 bull calves averaging £1,500. And I think that that's the way that we do it. On the feeding side of things, we do use a feed wagon, and there are quite a lot of expenses that come with that. But I find that the feed wagon is fantastic for measuring what each animal's getting. So it's quite good for records. But more importantly than that, I think that it's better for the animals. You've very content animals, and the animals which are performing very well. With the breeding animals, with the cows, I think that it is pretty critical, the feed wagon, because we can control the condition scores very closely coming up to calving, and having less calving problems before that. I think it would be certainly not impossible without the feed wagon, but it'd be a lot harder than it is for us at the moment. And we're trying to make the transition as stress-free as possible for the calves coming in. So they'll be in a month, 6 weeks sort of thing, and then we'll be taking them off their mums. And we're doing that really because we want to start gripping back slightly what these cows are being fed. The autumn calvers, they're inside down at Barra, and the reason we put them there is because we have more trouble with the little calves on their mothers. They seem to be more susceptible to picking up pneumonia. The setup there is a lot airier, if you like. The calves and the cattle can go inside and outside. So we're trying to get the environment as close to being outside as possible, and hopefully limiting the levels of pneumonia there. We have spent, quite a few years now trying to tighten up the calving. We're pretty stringent about bulls staying out solely for 10 weeks and taking them out, and for that, we've killed a lot of cows over the year because they haven't fitted into our breeding blocks. With the heifers, we're doing the same thing there, except they're only getting 6 weeks. We put in fully plenty heifers into the bulling group, and if they don't hold in 6 weeks, it means that we're not going to be short thereafter. This is a fruit enterprise. We've got 20 acres of fruit here, which is now providing more than half of our output of the farm annually. We started here, as I said earlier, 10 years ago, and we started with 6 acres of raspberries. That's developed now into about 10 acres of raspberries and 10 acres of strawberries. The farm's split into blocks. We've quite a sophisticated software program which is able to record the farm as individual blocks. So behind me at the moment we've got a block which is called Old Haygroves. It's a 3-acre block. Now on that we're able to measure all of the inputs. So whether it's fertiliser, whether it's the tonnage coming off it, all the tasks that are taking place on this block. We'll get a very, very accurate measure as to what the fruit enterprise is doing as a whole, but much more detailed than that, how each individual block is is performing. Then with that information we can decide what to do as a whole over the whole fruit enterprise, but also what to do with individual blocks. We've tried to take what we've learnt here and use it on the rest of our farm. So we're not looking at the farm as we do look at the farm as a general, but we're trying to look at fields as much more individual. When we're weaning, whether it's calves or lambs off an individual field, we're weighing what comes off there as well. This is giving us great information that without measuring grass growth, we're actually getting the information as to how many tons of lamb or how many tons of beef have been produced off that field. This is then kind of highlighting whether there's some action needs to be taken with this field, whether it's to reseed it, whether it's to check its lime again, even if it hasn't been 5 years since we checked it before. Where at all possible, we're allocating costs throughout the year and pigeonholing them in our financial records. So if we're buying a particular product, it's given an analysis code and invariably a sub-analysis code as well. At the end of the financial year, that then makes it quite simple to be drawing up some sort of financial performance per enterprise. We try and compare the 3 different enterprises as much as possible for a gross margin figure, and then we're trying to allocate where it's reasonably feasible to allocating a fixed cost as well. But we're not trying to allocate which is completely hypothetical to allocate. If we can't allocate it, then we don't bother doing it. This then gives us a fairly accurate picture of how the enterprises are comparing against each other. My intention here is to continue to grow. I would like the business to be growing by somewhere between 10 and 20% on an annual basis. I mean, it's not always possible, but that would be my intention. I'm going to try and attack the costs, starting with the biggest ones, the ones that I think I can do something about. So on the cattle side of things, for instance, labour is 30% of the cost of my cattle production. I would see that the obvious way of diluting this is to have more cattle and to reduce the effect that man is having on the cattle enterprise. I think that's achievable as well if the systems are simple and if he has a good setup. I think that it's possible for the 2 men to produce more animals.